I hope you've had a great weekend of worship and fellowship with God's people and that you are continuing to grow in your faith. While we're an educational institution, I have a passion that we reach our, not just our head, but also our heart, because it's the people who are passionate to follow the Lord Jesus Christ who are effective in ministry. As we begin this third week of our uh, study, increasingly I understand the complexity of cultures. Whether you stay within one ethnicity or you move to multi ethnicities, each of us have our own culture. Our parents may have a very similar culture, but we probably have made some changes to that culture because we are change agents. Our neighborhood has certain cultures, and our church has different cultures, and our larger community has a culture. All of those are important dynamics as we pause to think about cultural dynamics of congregational ministry. I really appreciate this book by the Myers, The Search to Belong. It is the subject of our video for this week. But in it, he very clearly talks about the different aspects of belonging. I find it very helpful. He begins developing this in chapter 3, but on page 39, he talks about public space. And then he goes on page 44 about social space. And then he develops a couple pages later personal belonging. And then toward the end of the chapter, intimate belonging. It's important for us to recognize the value of those differing groups. Uh, I have been in charge of multiple uh, small group ministries for many, many years, and I have said in unfair ways, if you want to belong to part of our congregation, you need to be in a small group. But there are people who, because of work, family health issues, personal health, they do well to make it for one worship service. And some people are part of our church and belong, even though they only hear a audio rebroadcast of the service on the local radio station. We need to think about each area of belonging and how we can nurture healthy belonging in whatever level of belonging a person feels comfortable. So it's a lot to think about. Let me illustrate. In a sanctuary is public belonging. But when I go into the sanctuary, I invariably am socializing with a person or two before the service ever begins. In some situations, I become involved in a very personal interaction, as I did yesterday morning before the service began with a member uh, about some issues. It can also happen, and perhaps you've experienced this personally or helping someone, that a person comes for significant spiritual help, and in that process, you enter a very intimate time with that person. Doesn't mean you have a lasting, intimate relationship with them, but you draw them to the throne of God and help them. So, as Myers says in the book, belonging can happen in every category, and don't forget about that. They're all important. And then we have the book by Branson Martinez. I have not gotten that chapter read yet, but I plan to later today. We have the video, and then there's a website that you can check it. It's not an evangelical website. It's not written from most of our biblical views, so that's very valid to help us to get a larger view of what culture is about, and a great discussion board uh, about some of the myths of belonging. So that's where those assignments are. But in our week 3 assignment, I want you to also notice some very important aspects of what is coming in the future weeks. Uh, it says assignments 5.3 6:1 and 7:1, and it's congregational preparation. Now, a place or two in here, it says you can do this if you just visit a church once. Now, I want you just to stop and think about that. If you were the pastor of your church and I, a stranger, walked in and said, I have a project, I'd like for you to give me permission to interview you for an hour, and I want you to gather for me 5 to 7 people so that I can interview them. I anticipate you would be extremely reluctant to give me that permission. You don't know me from Sam. You don't know anything about what my motivations are. I could have some fake story. You need to do this with your own church. You need to be part of it. If you're the pastor of the church, you need to get a different spiritual leader within your congregation to answer the pastor questions. You read the directions there. It advises you to give the questions to your pastor ahead of time, to the 5 to 7 people you're going to interview, to give them the questions early. The second one is optional for your pastor. It doesn't mandate that, but I sure urge you to do that. Now, of that group of people, it is not your fellow Sunday school teachers, it's not your small group, it's not your buddies at the church. It's a cross section. You might have a widow, a married elderly person who has been a member of the church for 50 years. It might be a teenager. It might be a young single. It might be a new mom or a new dad. It needs to be a cross section of ages, educational background, perhaps ethnicity if your church is multi-ethnic, a diverse group, and then you meet as a group. Now, if you don't meet those 2 requirements, your paper will be significantly penalized because of that. You will find both the pastoral interview and the congregational interview very rich. Students have told me repeatedly that was the best part of a class I've ever taken. And so it requires planning ahead. I joke with, when I was a pastor, said I have nothing to do in 6 weeks. Well, you don't have 6 weeks before you need to interview him. But let's see, that's going to be the week of February 6th. So that's coming right up. I think it's February 13th that week. Now, the week of February 6th is a demographic study, and you can get demographic information all over the computer. Now, let's say you live in Chicago northwest suburbs. Don't get Chicago Northwest. Choose your zip code or some other identifying area around your church. The focus that we're wanting to gain from this is that you and church leadership can begin to see who's the culture around your church and interact with that as it relates to ministry. So this is a fun exercise. You can get the requirements for that demographic study very easily, but it needs to include age breakdown, economic background, ethnicity, gender, and marital status. So that those are all important aspects of that. Someplace in there it says about giving a video. I don't see how any of these projects can be adequately done with a video. Besides, I don't have a rubric to grade a video. So it's going to need to be written material. God bless you as you work this week as well as in coming weeks, and plan ahead for those coming weeks. God bless you.